Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Unbashful. If it's your first time here, I want to thank you for stopping by. My name is Nicholas Doucette. I'm an aspiring screenwriter, actor, and podcaster, and I just love cinema. I'm a cinema nerd, and I try to talk about movies and TV every single week. Sometimes life gets in the way, so it might be every other week, but I try to aim for one episode a week, and that's what we're doing here today. And we've talked about on this channel the James Gunn news. We've speculated on, what he could announce, what he won't announce, how much will he announce. And the last episode I did with a couple of friends of mine, we were talking about this news, and we were, I mentioned that James Gunn made it a point that these announcements were going to be coming out this month. And that was like 3 days ago. And I was saying to myself, okay, well, we're nearing the end. So, is he going to delay it? And then, of course, he came through on the final day here of January. And before I give you all of my thoughts and we get into these announcements, let me actually list the announcements first, because if you don't know, I might as well fill you in. And just, one thing on a side note, my voice probably sounds a little different. I'm having some kind of voice, or my throat's, something's going on with it. I wouldn't say I'm sick. I just kind of woke up feeling a little bit strange this morning, a little bit of raspiness in my throat. So I do apologize about that. But let me pull up the article here that I was reading. It has a list of all the new James Gunn announcements, and I'll just go through it from top to bottom. Hollywood Reporter, DC movies. Okay. All right, so starting off here, we have Creature Commandos. Actually, before I get into this, let me just talk about the announcement video James Gunn put out. And he addressed the lack of continuity between the DC universe in the last several years. And he made it a point that, his words, not mine, he said, our job, me and Peter's job, is to come in and connect everything, have the same actors, and have everything told in a streamlined story that feeds into one another. However, he did make it clear that you will have these other spin-off films like The Batman, like Todd Phillips' Joker, and he says that these will be categorized as Elseworld projects. So I like that he made that distinction. I was never really worried that Matt Reeves' Batman universe was in jeopardy. I was never worried that Todd Phillips' Joker Folie à Deux was in jeopardy. I mean, just for the simple fact that Folie à Deux is in the middle of production. Now, it's not unheard of for films to get canned even after they're done shooting. Of course, that happened with The Batgirl, but I think that was a very different scenario. I don't think the studio was entirely confident in the direction of where that film was going, or even how the film was in general from screenings and things like that. The reception wasn't very good, but we'll never know. That's a whole other can of worms. We'll never know. Maybe that Batgirl film was peak DC. But from all accounts, it wasn't. So it's nice to hear. It's nice to get that assurance that the Batman will continue. And we do know that the sequel from the Matt Reeves Batman has an official date of, I believe, October 23rd, 2025. And that's right around when I suspected anyways. I think Matt Reeves is still writing the script, and I believe Robert Pattinson is off shooting a film with the director from Parasite. So he's going to be busy for a little while. And, I think that's more than enough time anyways. It gives Matt Reeves, more time to flesh out the script. He says he's about halfway done. And, of course, the rewrites and all kinds of things will happen along the way. So I think that's a healthy amount of time. And the film is going to be simply called The Batman Part 2. And I'm glad. I think that's fitting. It's simple. At the end of the day, a title doesn't really impact the film, but there's rumors that Mr. Freeze is going to be the antagonist. I would have found it a little bit cheesy to call it like the Batman frozen in Gotham or something like that. I don't know, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. But so yeah, let me just to get that out of the way. I'm glad that James Gunn addressed that, and he talked about how the priority is to create a connected story and a connected cinematic universe. We all suspected that, but I'm glad he addressed that before even getting into the announcements. So with that out the way, let's get into the announcements here. So we're going to start off with Creature Commandos. This is slated as a 7-episode animated series written by Gunn that is already in production. Originally a team of classic monsters assembled to fight Nazis, this is a modern take on the concept. The voice actors have yet to be cast, but the executives are looking to find people who can voice the animated characters and also portray the live-action versions from the anti-hero show, up in movies and series. That's pretty interesting. So it's very similar to what Marvel's done with What If. You have the actors from, obviously, the MCU coming in and doing voice acting, like you have Benedict Cumberbatch, you have RDJ, so that's pretty interesting. I'm not going to lie, I know nothing about Creature Commandos, just from my very little research I did before the show here. Apparently the team consists of Rick Flag's father. Rick Flag is, of course, from the Suicide Squad, Weasel, and just looking at the photo here, all these other characters I know nothing about. So that's the first project. That will be an animated series. Up next, we have Waller and a spin-off of James Gunn's own HBO Max hit series Peacemaker. Viola Davis will return as a ruthless and morally ambiguous head of a government task force. It is being written by Crystal Henry. She was, of course, behind Watchmen. And Jeremy Carver, the creator of the Doom Patrol series. And I know the Doom Patrol series has quite a large fan base. A friend of mine was actually talking to me about the show yesterday, or a few days ago, because we were talking about Brendan Fraser, and then he told me how Brendan Fraser's a Doom Patrol, and he's fantastic. So up next, the Superman movie. So we knew this was a little breadcrumb that we had already gotten a couple of months ago. I'd say about a month ago. James Gunn talked about how he addressed the Henry Cavill news, and he addressed that Henry Cavill will not be part of DC anymore, and he won't be playing Superman. And his reasoning why was because they're telling a younger story of the character. So, and I talked about how I feel like the reason why he wanted to address that first and get that out the way before this announcement was to silence all the Henry Cavill discussion and just give fans time to move on. Move on sounds ridiculous. This is a comic book character, and I think Henry Cavill had his run. I think he did well. For me personally, I've never really been the biggest Superman fan, just in general. I find his character to be is gonna sound like a hot take. I just don't find the character to be that interesting. I know there's elements. I know that there's very much the outsider kind of story being told. You have a guy who's an alien and he's trying to live amongst moral beings when he's clearly a god, but he can't, the certain parts of his life, like when he's working at the Daily Planet, he has to channel that, and he has to blend in with the other people, which is inherently a struggle. So it's that duality. So I can understand that, but I'm hoping with a new take on the Superman character, with a new story being told, a new actor, I'm hoping that I can be hooked and be invested in this world. So finally, James Gunn talked about this film. The title is officially Superman Legacy. And by the way, all this information I'm reading, I want to give credit where credit is due. It's coming from the Hollywood Reporter article, and it's been written by Boris Kitt. I've read a lot of his stuff before. He seems to be the main guy that covers the kind of comic book side of Hollywood. Excuse me. So here we go. Here's the description. So the movie featuring the Man of Steel that Gunn is writing and may direct, although no commitments on that have been made. While the two previous titles are meant to be aperitifs, in Safran's words, Superman is the true kickoff of the duo's DCU plans. Quote, "It's not an origin story," Safran said. "It focuses on Superman balancing his Kryptonian heritage with his human upbringing. He is the embodiment of truth, justice, and the American way. He's kindness in a world that thinks that kindness is old-fashioned." That's a very interesting thing to say about the character. And that's, in a way, that's sort of been my criticism. I feel like Superman's kind of a Boy Scout. But you know what? That's actually a very interesting way to put it. He is kindness in a world that kindness is old-fashioned. Now, I'm not saying it's if you're kind, you're weak, or that's a sign of weakness, not at all. But, I like characters that have a little bit of edge to them, right? And that's kind of been one of the reasons why I don't think Superman is as interesting. I'm not saying a character that's an asshole is the most interesting, not at all. I think it goes both ways. There has to be elements to a character. A character can't be a complete villain. There has to be some sense of, arc to them, right? But anyway, so our release date of July 11th, 2025 has been penciled in. 2025 is going to be a huge year for comic book films. We're going to get the Batman sequel. We're going to get this film. And then we're going to get Marvel. We're going to get what comes out in 2025. I think we're going to get the Kang Dynasty, barring a delay. We're going to get the Fantastic Four. We're going to get, I think, Deadpool comes out at the end of 2024. Or maybe, I can't remember. But it's and probably a new Spider-Man film. That's been reported as well. So that'll be a big year for comic book films. But anyway, so let's get back on track. So the next project here, Lanterns. Greg Berlanti's long-in-the-works Green Lantern TV series has been scrapped. And Gunn and Safran have parted ways with the longtime DC series steward. In its place will be a new take on the space cops with power rings. Quote, our vision for this is very much in the vein of True Detective, Safran described. It's terrestrial base. It will feature prominent Lantern heroes Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart, and is one of the most important shows that they have in development. This plays a really big role in leading to the main story we are telling across film and TV. Excuse me. This one, to me, was probably the biggest surprise. And for me, it was that True Detective reference. Now, I'm actually still watching True Detective, and I'm not even done it. But I love it. I think it's great. The tone, the chemistry between Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey. And obviously, this is just a reference. I'm sure that this won't be the tone and like a beat by beat, interpretation of that. Obviously not. But the fact that they're saying that in the same breath of what this series could be, that's exciting. And I'm not even a big fan, really. I'm not even really a fan at all of the Green Lantern. I've never seen the Ryan Reynolds film. I know it's been ridiculed by a lot of people, but I've just never really had an interest in that comic, in those characters. And for all accounts, a lot of Green Lantern fans are excited because a lot of people have told me that there are basically two predominant Green Lanterns that have had stories told in the comics. The Green Lantern Corps is like an entire universe in and of itself, but the two predominant Green Lanterns have always been Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart. So a lot of fans are excited that instead of trying to figure out which one do we do, they're kind of pitting them both together in almost like a buddy cop. And that's essentially that's the True Detective reference. That's where that comes into play here. So that's really excited, and HBO is behind it. So that to me, like when I heard about that and when I was reading about that actually caught me by surprise. Probably more than most of some of these other projects. But let's move on here. So up next we have a movie. So we have The Authority. So The Authority is a movie based on a team of superheroes with rather extreme methods of protecting the planet that first originated in the late 1990s under an influential imprint known as the Wildstorm, run by artist and now head of DC Publishing Jim Lee. Quote, one of the things of the DCU is that it's not just a story of heroes and villains, said Gunn. Not every film and TV show is going to be about good guys versus bad guys. Giant things from the sky and good guy wins. There are white hats, black hats, and gray hats, added Safran. They are kind of like Jack Nicholson and A Few Good Men. They know what you want them on. They know what you want them on the wall, or at least they believe that. So pretty interesting as well. Once again, I know nothing about these characters, so I'm not going to sit here and try and pretend like I do. From the little research I know, they seem like the anti-Justice League. That's basically the best description I can give without sounding like a moron about them. I'll leave that up to the other channels that prioritize and covering and breaking down those deep cut characters. But this doesn't surprise me. James Gunn, we obviously know him as the guy that likes to tell or likes to bring characters to the big screen that not a lot of people are familiar with. And now him being that co-CEO of DC Studios, he's going to have to make it a priority to kind of cater to both. He's going to have to tell, and reboot these characters that a lot of us people know, like, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. But he's also obviously going to implement characters that are deep cuts from the comics that some people are big fans of, but a lot of people don't really know them. So I'm not surprised that we're seeing something like this. So that's pretty exciting. So let's move on to the next one. Up next, we got Paradise Lost. This is going to be an HBO Max series, and it's being described as a Game of Thrones style drama set on the all-female island that is Wonder Woman's birthplace, Themyscira, filled with political intrigue and scheming between power players. It takes place before the events of the Wonder Woman films. All right, that's interesting. Up next, we have another series. It's called The Brave and the... this is a movie. Okay, this is the big one. So this is about Batman, so let me get into it. So DC's film, this is a film, by the way. It's called The Brave and the Bold. This is the introduction of the DCU Batman, said Gunn, of Bruce Wayne, and also introduces our favorite Robin, Damian Wayne, who is a little son of a bitch. The movie will, that's quote what James Gunn said, the movie will take inspiration from the now classic Batman run written by Grant Morrison that introduced Batman to his son he never knew existed, a murderous tween raised by assassins. It's a very strange father and son story. And importantly, it will feature Batman not played by Robert Pattinson. However, there's also the Batman sequel. Pattinson will continue to portray the Dark Knight in at least one more crime saga movie directed by Matt Reeves. That movie, the executives revealed, will be released on October 3rd. Excuse me, I was mistaken. I said October 23rd. October 3rd, 2025, and is being titled The Batman Part 2. 2025 is going to be a very big year for DC crowd Saffron. Superman and Batman within the same year. Okay. So I know I already talked about the Robert Pattinson stuff, but I just thought I would go through it one more time. So, okay, this is probably my biggest question heading into, and probably a lot of you, this is probably your biggest question heading into these announcements. What are they going to do with Batman? Because James Gunn has announced prior to this day that Batman was going to be a big part of the DCU. Some people speculated maybe they'll turn Batman for the first time ever, live action wise, into a series instead of a film, since they'll have Robert Pattinson, and maybe to divide that potential confusion between audiences. Although I think most people could probably get it. And I think actually the title is a clever way to do that, right? Instead of just calling it The Batman and His Son. I think that's smart that they went with The Brave and the Bold. But this answers the question, and I'm very interested. I'm curious. So let me just go through this. This is the introduction to DC Batman. I'll introduce his favorite Robin, Damian Wayne. Okay, so from all accounts, this seems like it's I'm acting like I'm drawing big conclusions here. This is going to be a father and son story. And I started to sit back and started to think about this, and I almost thought of like they could take the approach of God of War, right? From a perspective like that. Not in terms of the storytelling. They're not going to be rolling through a boat and going through Asgard and Norse mythology, but in terms of like that kind of relationship. But at the same time, they're saying here that this is Batman to his son he never knew existed. So that'll be interesting. I'm curious how they're going to explore that. A murderous teen raised by assassins. It's a very strange father and son story. That's what it said in the article. Yeah, that would be strange. I'm just trying to think about that. And I did a little bit of research, and a character that has a very, well, not even a character, a group of characters that has a very pivotal role in this story, in the comics, is the League of Shadows. And for those of you who don't know, the League of Shadows were actually in the Dark Knight films. You had obviously Ra's al Ghul. You had Bane. Although I don't know if Bane is actually a member of the League of Shadows in the comics. I think that just might have been an adaptation that Christopher Nolan did. And to my understanding, now for the comic historians, please correct me if I'm wrong. From my understanding, that Talia al Ghul, who's Ra's al Ghul's daughter, is actually the mother of this of what's his name, Damian Wayne, and he was raised by his mother, and he was raised with the League of Shadows. So that's probably the reference where they're saying a murderous tween raised by assassins. So that's very interesting. I'm curious because Batman has never really been cast young, and I predicted heading into these announcements that while James Gunn has said that he is going to cast a younger Superman, I didn't necessarily think they were going to do the same thing for Batman. Now, I don't think they're going to cast Batman maybe as old as Ben Affleck was when he was first cast, but I could definitely see somebody in their late 30s, early 40s being cast. Because for me, I don't really think Batman is a character that you can cast at like age 21, 22 years old. For me, I just think that's too young. And even more so, to kind of go back to the casting, I talked about this on my last episode, but if you just look at the history of actors that have been cast to play Batman, usually the producers don't typically take a risk in terms of, status in Hollywood. Typically, we've had actors that were already very well known, that had already done a lot of different work. Obviously, Christian Bale, George Clooney, Ben Affleck. So there's a trend and there's a history of the studio not really taking that risk of maybe going for an actor. Like, let's say somebody in Tom Holland's position. Before Tom Holland was cast as Spider-Man, he was in a couple of films, but generally speaking, if you ask somebody on the street who's Tom Holland back in 2014, I think most people probably wouldn't really know. Now, the reason why it could be different this time is because it is kind of interesting that we're going to be having two Batman. And right now we have obviously call it the solo Batman now with with Robert Pattinson, and that's a very established actor. His stock has just continued to rise over the years as he's been working with a lot of auteur directors like the Safdie brothers, like obviously Robert Eggers, and I can't remember the name of the guy that he's doing his next film with Mickey 7, I believe. So now that they have this Batman that's continuing on with an already very well-known actor, maybe now James Gunn, Peter Safran, the producers, they can possibly explore taking that risk of maybe going for somebody who has been in fewer projects but has a lot of promise as an actor. Or who knows, maybe they won't. I still think that they could just go out and get somebody like Jake Gyllenhaal, for example. We don't really know. Excuse me. I just thought I'd kind of point that out. However, for a character like Superman, and James Gunn has specifically said he's casting younger, I feel like it's almost certain that the Superman casting will be somebody not as known to general audiences. They'll probably try and find an actor, because I feel like Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, but I feel like Superman specifically is going to really be the anchor of this DC universe, particularly for the lack of support for this character over the last 10, 15 years. Like, we haven't had, when did Man of Steel come out? Like 2012, 2013? Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been some time. And even throughout some of the Zack Snyder films, I wasn't a fan of how they treated the character and how they treated his arc. That's part of the reason why I don't find him very interesting. I just don't feel like the character was given enough in these films. So it seems like Peter Safran and James Gunn are making it a point to put Superman on that pedestal and have him essentially be the showrunner of the DCU. So they're probably going to want to pick out an actor who is excited and who is willing to make an imprint and commit 10 to 15 years to playing this character. Because it's, and I talked about this with a friend of mine yesterday. There's so many actors that shit on Marvel, shit on the MCU for whatever reason. And I can't stand, when people do that, because there are millions of actors that would give everything they have to even get an audition, to get some kind of opportunity to play in a role like that. So I think that they'll probably try and go for one of those actors that's willing to just give themselves, their heart and soul to this role, rather than going for a lot of these actors that they're obviously amazing and they're great as performers, but they have this really like pretentious attitude with like, comic book films, that's not nobody takes that serious. Like, I don't know, I can't stand that personally. And that's just, maybe that's the aspiring actor in me kind of bleeding out. Because, I don't know. But yeah, that's just how I feel about that. But anyways, let's get back on track here to the announcements. So we talked about Batman. Next, we got Booster Gold. This is going to be an HBO Max series based on a unique, lesser-known hero created in 1986. Safran said of the series, it's about a loser from the future who uses basic future technology to come back to today and pretend to be a superhero. Gunn described it as imposter syndrome as superhero. That sounds really, really cool. And I'm really surprised with the angle they're taking with some of these series. I actually would almost argue that these HBO Max series that they're developing in this chapter 1 here almost sound more intriguing than the film side. Don't get me wrong, I'm obviously excited for this Batman project and Superman, but I'm a fan of these kind of odd characters. And Booster Gold just sounds like something like hilarious, but also entertaining. And so I'm curious to see how that one plays out. So up next, we have a couple other movies on the list. Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. Taking its cues from the recent Tom King written miniseries, this movie promises a different take from what most think of when Superman's cousin comes to mind. We will see the difference between Superman, who was sent to Earth and raised by loving parents from the time he was an infant, versus Supergirl, raised on a rock, a chip off Krypton, and who watched everyone around her die and be killed in terrible ways for the first 14 years of her life, and then come to Earth. She's much more hardcore and not the Supergirl we're used to. So this actually sounds very interesting. So they're basically saying here in this description that we're going to see Superman, who was raised in a loving household and had that parental guidance surrounding him, where Supergirl, however, is more jaded, is more kind of rough around the edges because she didn't have those parental figures around her. And she literally grew up on a detached piece, a dismembered piece of Krypton. So that actually sounds very interesting to me. Traditionally, I wouldn't even really care about a Supergirl film, similar to how I wouldn't even normally care about a Superman film. But to me, this description of the Supergirl film actually sounds quite interesting. So the last film on this list here of these announcements is Swamp Thing, a horror film that promises to close out the first part of the first chapter. Before audiences get to see those films and series, however, there's a matter of this year's crop of films. Okay. Yeah, so that runs out the announcements. So we have Swamp Thing, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, Booster Gold. We have the Brave and the Bold, Paradise Lost, The Authority, Lanterns, Superman Legacy, Waller, and Creature Commandos. Okay, so now that we got through the announcements, let me go to my notes here. Let's address some of, I think, the biggest questions that I had heading into this announcement, and if they were answered. And I feel like a lot of you will probably have these same questions as well. So for me, the first question I had, like a lot of you, is this a full reboot? And I would probably call it a soft reboot. And I'm still a little bit confused. Now, for the most part, it seems like it is a full reboot. For the most part. But I'm not willing to completely go there and call it a full reboot, because we're having a lot of conflicting reports. Like, for example, just the other day, Dave Bautista was commenting about how he talked to James Gunn about this new job he's got, and he said, he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something along the lines of like, James Gunn is going younger, he's rebooting. I think that's a good idea. But then you have a Waller series, right? With Viola Davis coming back to play the character, which is obviously a Zack Snyder-kin universe character. So that kind of, leaves me scratching my head. And then I didn't even mention this. You have James Gunn and Peter Safran. Like they talked about next year's films, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, The Flash, and Aquaman. And you got to understand that an announcement like this was 100% scripted. I'm sure James Gunn was very careful with each and everything that he said, and many times he acknowledged these films in the beginning of his little presentation, and he said they are connected to the DCU. That's so. Once again, that kind of confuses me. To me, I more or less look at these next 4 films like Blue Beetle, The Flash, Aquaman, Aquaman 2, and Shazam: Fury of the Gods as almost these segues into the actual new DCU. But the fact that he still, once again, I'm paraphrasing, but the fact that he still said that they are connected, like that was not by mistake. Like he knew what he was saying. It was the whole thing was calculated. I'm sure they've been building up this presentation for months now. And actually, I think the article goes on to address here. Let me see here. Okay, so this is interesting. The Hollywood Reporter article said, Gunn and Safran are high in the quartet made under the previous film regime. In the aegis of DC films, hopefully I pronounced that word correctly, run by former head Walter Hamada, Gunn calls The Flash, directed by Andy Muschietti, probably one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of, not to get off track, but I'm hearing a lot of talk about this Flash film, and people are comparing it to The Dark Knight. I don't buy that for a second. I will wait and see. Now, I'm interested in the film, and it was in my top 10 most anticipated. I think it was my number 9 or my number 10. But I think people might be blowing this one out of the water. We heard before the Eternals came out that people inside Marvel were saying it was the best film the cinematic universe has produced yet. And I love the Eternals. Well, I like the Eternals. And I actually think I like it more than most people. But no, I wouldn't even say it's top 15 MCU or even top 20, to be quite frank. But it's very good, though. And I think this Flash film, at the very least, will be very good. Granted, we've only had one trailer. And that trailer, that was like 3 years ago now, or like 2 years ago that we got that trailer at DC Fandom. Yeah, so where was I going? Okay, yeah, the reboot. Like I was saying, I think it is a soft reboot. I think they're gonna salvage these next few projects and try and see what they can get out of them and use them to segue into the actual DCU. I'm still confused that James Gunn referred to these projects as connected. But how connected are they really? You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe they're going to do the multiverse approach. And I've talked about this before. Maybe they will, but I don't expect them to do the multiverse approach because Marvel's already doing that. And I feel like if DC wants to start out and separate themselves as much as they can, I feel like they'll probably want to put the multiverse on the back burner for a little while. Maybe address it down the road. But I didn't think that was going to be the MacGuffin, if you will, right off the bat. But maybe they will. And I'm sure it's possible that they can incorporate the multiverse while still separating it. I mean, it's really all just interpretation. It's not like just because Marvel is doing the multiverse, or it's not even like Marvel's the pioneer of the multiverse. There's so many other TV and films already that have dealt with that. So Marvel, if anything, is coming into an already well-established concept. But in terms of a cinematic universe, I think, like I said, I think DC probably would want to do something different in terms of starting off. And they addressed the whole thing with Ezra Miller. They said, among those stars is Ezra Miller, the troubled star of The Flash, who's found themselves at the center of several criminal investigations. They pleaded guilty to trespassing earlier this month, and who, in August, announced they were seeking treatment for complex mental health issues. And it's interesting. This is the first time really anybody from Warner Brothers publicly has talked about this. So we actually have a quote from Safran, and I believe James as well. And the article says, Safran said the executives remain hopeful Miller is on a path to betterment. Quote, Ezra is completely committed to their recovery. We are fully supportive of that journey they are on right now. When the time is right, when they are ready to have that discussion, we will all figure out what's the best path forward. But right now, they're completely focused on their recovery. And in our conversation with them in the last couple months, it feels like they are making enormous progress. Okay, look, I'll give you my short little opinion about the Ezra Miller situation. I think he should absolutely be recast. I understand why they're putting the film out, because there's so many other people that work their ass off on this project. And I get, I don't condemn the studio for putting it out. However, I do think afterwards he should be let go from playing the character. And it's good that Ezra Miller is getting treatment and doing all he can to, get themselves, in a better place. But I think they should do that in their own time. In the meantime, in the interim, recast them, find a new actor. Ezra Miller, I'm sure, can come back to Hollywood and have a prosperous career. We've seen actors come back from damn near horrific, criminal behavior. So it has been done. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's been done. And I think Ezra can, like I said, they can do that treatment on their own time. But in that meantime, I don't think it's appropriate to continue letting Ezra Miller play this character, because we can't just forget. Yes, it's good to hear that they're in treatment and that they're taking this process serious. That's good to hear. You want to hear that. But you can't neglect the fact that they still need to take responsibility for what they're trying to. And I'm just some fucking guy that has 100 subscribers. I don't know the full story, and really what I say doesn't mean shit. But if you want my opinion about it, it's good that they're taking some responsibility. It's good that they're taking steps of treatment. But I think they could do that on their own time without playing the character. I think the appropriate course of action, recast the character. I think it'll speak way bigger volumes if they keep the character. And I could see them keeping Ezra Miller and saying something like, well, we're impressed with his behavior and we think he deserves a second shot. And absolutely, I think most people, barring something extremely terrible, most people deserve a second chance. Absolutely. And I think Ezra Miller will get a second chance in Hollywood. But I think it's too soon to just say, they're doing treatment. Well, great, we're going to keep him in the universe. I think they should continue doing treatment, continue to better themselves, get themselves in a healthier place. But in the meantime, I think it's the appropriate decision to recast the character. That's just my opinion. I've never really talked about that in length. I don't want to be one of these channels that feeds off negativity and clicks and whatever. And I know that will probably kind of fuck me over a bit, because I just know the landscape of YouTube and I know where YouTube is right now and probably where it will continue going. That is the most attractive content for a lot of people, is that hate content. And I'm just not going to take part in that. However, I thought I would address this. I feel like I address it in a healthy way. I don't know Ezra Miller. I'm not going to sit here and who am I to sit here and say he's this, he's that, he's the other. I'm just going off of the facts that the public knows. That's just my opinion about it. But yeah, so let's get into the next question here as part of the discussion. So let's get back to the other questions that I had here that I was hoping to have answered with these announcements. My number 2 question is, what is the Batman situation? So I'm glad that we've actually had that answered. Now, of course, we will see in the Flash film, we're going to get Ben Affleck one last time. And we're going to get Michael Keaton one last time. And, that's nice. It's like a nice little send-off to the character. We know that Ben Affleck himself, not even just his interpretation of Batman, he had a very tumultuous experience playing the character. From obviously the director shifts halfway through production, through Justice League, and I think just some of maybe his own personal life and things like that, which I'm not going to touch on. But So it's nice to, and he's described that his experience filming The Flash, from what I've heard, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's described that as probably his favorite experience playing the character. So, that's nice to hear. And then moving forward after that, we're going to have 2 Batman. And I think audiences will be able to adjust. That sounds silly to even say, but a lot of people have kind of over-exaggerated the fact that how are you going to have 2 characters at the same time simultaneously? And I think they could do it. I think it's all going to be about interpretation and approach. Like, you have the Matt Reeves world, a very kind of David Fincher, grit and grind, Taxi Driver kind of New York style Gotham universe. So then I think that what James Gunn will do is maybe take a more lighter approach while still maintaining the spirit of Batman, because Batman is inherently a darker character in the comics, obviously, but have that cinematic universe flair, if you will. A lot of people criticize us about the MCU. There's that MCU taste formula, if you will. That's just what makes the MCU the MCU. I think it's a successful formula. And I think we'll probably see that with the DCU. You'll be able to separate these 2 films, or these 2 characters, rather. I think the audiences will get, okay, this is an Elseworld Matt Reeves project, and this is the Batman that's connected to the larger cinematic universe. Excuse me. The third question, which was not answered, is Jason Momoa the rumored Lobo character? So it has been heavily speculated, even teased. I'll even go one step further, even teased by Jason Momoa that he's going to be playing Lobo. He was in an interview, and the interviewer asked, the interviewer was just straightforward and addressed the rumor. He said, there's a lot of discussion going around on the internet that you're going to be playing Lobo. And of course, Jason Momoa is very vague, very coy, and answered it in a very indirect way. And he said something along the lines of, all I'll say this is, a lot of people know what my favorite comic is, and you can do that research on what that is for yourself. It was something very unclear, obviously. And he tweeted out a video the other week of him leaving a meeting, like literally in real time, like walking out some mansion, literally walking out shortly after having a meeting with James Gunn and Peter Safran. And I guess what I suspect is that meeting was probably ironing out maybe some contract details and really kind of setting the clear direction straight of what's going to be happening with you, and if he is playing Lobo, what's going to be happening with you and Lobo, and what your place is in the DCU. So I still believe he's going to be playing Lobo, and it is worth noting that James Gunn said that in this first chapter of films, and I like it. I actually want to quickly address that. So this chapter 1 is called Gods and Monsters and Gods, or Gods and Monsters, I can't remember. And once again, that's a nice little way to separate themselves from the MCU, because this is, essentially their phase 1. But instead of just calling it chapter 1, they're giving it sort of like a subtitle. They're giving it chapter 1, Gods and Gods and Monsters. I think that's kind of cool. But yeah, so it is, like I said, it's worth noting that James Gunn said that we're going to announce some projects in chapter 1, but we're not going to announce all of them. So I still believe that Jason Momoa will be playing Lobo, and that his Lobo film or TV show, whatever it will be, I think it will be in this first chapter, Gods and Mischief. It's just one of those things that maybe just hasn't been announced yet. As for when we could get those announcements of the rest of chapter 1, maybe Comic-Con this summer would be a good spot to do that. Or maybe, I don't know if they're going to continue DC fandom. I think that might just be one of those things from the old regime that just might be a thing of the past. Who knows? Maybe they'll wait a couple of years. I don't really know how long this first chapter is going to be, or even how many chapters this 8 to 10 year plan will have. I imagine 3 is probably the safe guess, maybe 4. It really just depends. Like we're seeing with Marvel's condensed their phases. Before, their phases used to be like 6 years long in length. But now they're like 2 years. So, the multiverse saga will be 4 phases, right? Phase 4, 5, and 6. Or 3. Sorry, no. It's 3 phases, but it's shorter in length overall. It's not, whereas by the time Endgame came out, that was like 10 years of storytelling. When Secret Wars comes out, if it doesn't get delayed, it'd have been 7, 8 years before, since Endgame came out. So yeah, I'm getting off track here, but we don't have the answer to that, but I'm still pretty confident that Jason Momoa is playing Lobo. Number 4, my question was James Gunn going to make it a priority to introduce more obscure characters over the familiar characters? And I think we got the answer to that too. I'd say it's balanced. I'd say we have that James Gunn style, in terms of, having obscure characters. But we're also getting the Trinity, right? We're getting the Wonder Woman series. We're getting Batman and Superman. So I think a nice little I think it's balanced. I think it's perfect. Number 5, is James Gunn directing the Superman Legacy film? And I don't think he will be. I don't think they have a director yet. But I think if he knew that he was going to be directing this film, I think he would have used that as one of the headlining things to kind of make a big splash in this announcement. That's not to say, maybe as he gets further in the writing process, he develops a real kind of connection to the script, and maybe he feels like there's nobody else that's going to direct it or direct it and give it the justice that he can bring to it. Who knows? But for me, I feel like he's been writing the film now for, it seems like, a little while. I think if he was going to direct it, I think he would have already known. And I think he would have already kind of given himself, like, because he's the CEO now, he can do that if, like, without having to, seek counsel or ask somebody else. So I think if he wanted to direct it and he knew he was going to direct it, I think that would have been one of the things he would have announced. So I don't think they have a director yet, but I don't think it will end up being James Gunn. Is that all my questions here? I'm sure I probably have more. So was the build up to this announcement day, was the build up, underwhelming, overwhelming, and was it worth the wait? For me, I think it was worth the wait. And I got to be honest, it actually exceeded some of my expectations. Well, sort of. I would have liked to have seen maybe a Justice League film announced, but I'm sure that's one of those few projects in this chapter 1 that they left off the table to announce, kind of like the Lobo situation that I just talked about. But in terms of the amount of projects that were announced, that exceeded my expectations, because I only thought James Gunn and Peter Safran were only going to announce like maybe 3 films. That's it. I didn't even expect them to talk about TV. So the fact that they announced like 5 movies and like 4 TV shows, that I think that warranted the wait. So for me overall, I'm excited and I'm optimistic. I've always been on board with this decision to have James Gunn and Peter Safran tag teaming this new cinematic universe. I still have some questions about, the reboot. I guess it's pretty much a full reboot, but there are still some things that I think could use some clarification, like the Waller series, like James Gunn's, how he explained the most upcoming DC films. Maybe that specifically I'm reading too much into. Maybe that's more or less just him feeling like he just has to say that. Who knows? But overall, I think it was exciting. I didn't get everything that I was looking for, but for the most part, I feel I feel like it was worth the wait, and I feel excited. So I'll probably cut it there today, guys. I think I managed to get through everything. I'm just trying to make sure I address everything on the table. Yeah, I would have been really disappointed if they didn't address Batman, because I've talked about this before. Marvel is my favorite collection of superheroes to watch, but Batman has always been my favorite individual superhero. So, I can live without a Justice League announcement right now, but if they neglected Batman, to me, that would have been pretty disappointing. So I'm glad we at least got that. Hopefully in the future we get a little bit more. We get a little bit of a better understanding of this reboot. I mean, like I said for like the fifth time now, I'm pretty sure it's for the most part a reboot. But there are still some things, I would like to get answered. But I'm sure we will in the future. But anyways, guys, that's going to cut today's episode. If you liked what you saw, I'd really appreciate it if you guys subscribe to the channel. I try to come on here every week, talk about movies, talk about things that people in this, in this era of YouTube like to watch. And if you ever have any suggestions, throw them down in the comments below. I'm always open to new suggestions for content to make. But yeah, like the channel, like the video, share the channel, subscribe. It's the best way to support this channel and this journey I'm on. I'm very, 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 very small. We got a little over 100 subscribers, and I talked about it earlier. There are some things that I could do. I could go for the low-hanging fruit, make that, toxic, negative content that seems to be the most attractive thing right now. And that could probably get me more views and subscribers, but I don't want to be known as that guy. I want to make, content that has integrity, and I want to just be myself, and I don't want this to be fake. I want to be an actor, but I don't want this to be an act, if you know what I'm saying. So not to get all motivational and stuff like that. I'll probably cut it there because I'll start rambling on and on. But yeah, and if you are looking for an audio-only version of Unbashful, good news, you can find it everywhere. All streaming platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. It's probably up on Amazon, iHeartRadio, the whole nine. You can find it there. So if you want to listen to it on your commute to work, or anywhere else, you're going for a run, whatever, you can find it there, and I would very much support, I would very much appreciate the support there as well. Guys, I'll cut it there. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you on the next episode of Unbashful. Stay safe, stay happy, and have a good one.